Hey everyone, this week we're asking the question, is manual mode a must for proper photography? So I do sometimes read comments in photography forums and even in the comments of my own videos, suggesting that unless you're using manual mode, you're not really doing proper photography, or that all pros use manual and other modes such as shutter speed or aperture priority are not as good as manual. And today I'm going to investigate whether there's some truth in that, whether it's a bit of a myth, and basically what the pros and cons of the different priority modes are. Really, I'll be concentrating on aperture priority mode and manual mode and the differences between them, and mainly how they apply to landscape photography, but also other photography as well. And I've come out to Curbar Edge today, one of my favourite spots in the Peak District. I'm going to get some shots here at sunrise, sunset even, and yeah, we'll have a look at those later. And I'll probably do most of the talking from home because we're well into golden hour now and I don't really want to miss anything. So I'll probably cut to home, do some talking about the different priority modes and intersperse some footage of me getting the shots and show some shots along the way. So yeah, let's crack on, get some shots.
Okay, so what do we mean by a shooting mode? So manual mode or aperture priority mode, etc. I know a lot of you will already know this, but I do get quite a lot of beginners watching my channel as well. So for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know, it's a way of setting up your camera to control certain parameters such as aperture and shutter speed. So it will depend on your camera, but quite often there's a dial at the top. So here on my Nikon Z7, I've got this dial where I can turn it around and I've got little letters on there. And each letter will do something different. So we've got auto, that's the kind of full auto mode, which will set the shutter speed and aperture all automatically in camera. But you don't always get the best results out of that. So we do have a P for program mode. Now that's a little bit like auto mode, except it will adjust for certain conditions such as weather conditions, etc. And then we've got the shutter speed priority mode, so that will let you choose a shutter speed and it will lock that in and adjust the aperture for you to compensate and create a good exposure based on the shutter speed that you've selected. And then with aperture priority mode, that will let you set the aperture and then adjust the shutter speed accordingly based on your aperture and also your ISO that you've got selected. And then you've got manual mode, which lets you set everything manually. And sometimes you get some custom settings here. On the Z7 I've got U1, U2, U3. They'll just let you set up some custom settings in those banks there. And in different cameras that might be C1, C2, things like that. But they're the basic shooting modes. So like I said, it will depend on your camera. You might not have a dial to change those options. It might be a button or a menu system. But basically all or most cameras with interchangeable lenses, etc. will let you change the shooting mode. And as I said, in this video we're going to concentrate on landscape photography mainly, and aperture priority mode and manual mode, because they're the two that you're mainly going to be using for landscape photography. Okay, so let's talk about Aperture Priority mode. Aperture Priority mode tends to be more consistent in conditions where the light is going to be continually changing. So that obviously includes landscape photography. And also for landscape photography, depth of field tends to be quite important. You want to get all the scene in focus, you might be shooting a big vista and you want everything in focus front to back. And so aperture, which can control depth of field, becomes quite important. And shutter speed is less important because if you're on a tripod, as long as it's not too windy and you've got things moving around, then you can tend to use quite long shutter speeds. And often you might want to use long shutter speeds, particularly if you're shooting scenes with water, if you want that long exposure effect. Because there are less parameters to set, you've already got your aperture locked in, and your camera will sort out the shutter speed for you. Then you're freed up a little bit to think about other things such as your composition, your light, so you can put a bit more creativity into the art side of it without having to worry about all the technical stuff. But on the downside, in certain extreme situations, Aperture Priority mode is not going to give you the right exposure. It's usually when you're shooting a really high key scene, so really white, or a really low key scene that's really dark, or you've got extreme light and dark, shade and light and things like that, and your camera's just not going to meter it properly. So in those situations it's probably better to switch over to manual mode. So what about manual mode? Manual mode can be better when you're shooting in low light conditions or really bright conditions, where Aperture Priority mode is just not going to give you the right metering to give you a consistent or good exposure. It's also good when you've got consistent lighting, such as in a studio setup, for portraits for example, and you've got lights. You can set up your camera in manual mode, just leave it and shoot away, and you're always going to get consistent results because you've got consistent light. It can also be really useful when you want to shoot a series of long exposures and all of them to have the same shutter speed duration. So let's say that's 2 seconds. You set your camera to shutter speed priority mode, set it to 2 seconds, and all of your shots are going to be 2 seconds, and if you're shooting water for example, they're all going to look similar with the same amount of blur in the water. But the negatives of using manual mode are that there's more to think about, that's less time to focus on your composition and the lighting and the artistic side of your shot, and your camera is not going to adjust to changing conditions. So if you're out shooting landscapes and you've got really dramatic skies and lighting that's changing, then your camera's not going to adjust to that as you're going along, unless you're very quick and you can keep changing all your settings and you know exactly how to balance all that out so that when you get the results back into Lightroom later, they're all going to be consistent. It's highly unlikely, but it's possible, I guess. If you're shooting in something like Aperture Priority mode, that's going to be much easier. And generally, just let the camera do some work for you. It's not cheating. Lots of pros use Aperture Priority mode, Shutter Speed Priority mode, and it's really going to free you up to do other things with your photography. So I know that's a very brief overview of the shooting modes such as manual mode, aperture priority mode, etc. But it'll just give you an idea of the benefits of using something like aperture priority mode for landscape photography. How it's not cheating, it's more like using autofocus. You can shoot in manual if you want, in manual focus mode, but it's quite time consuming. You're not necessarily going to get better results, and you could be using that time to concentrate on other things in your photography. So don't be afraid to switch to aperture priority mode or shutter speed priority mode if the conditions are right to do so. There are just a few more shots to show you, so I'll put those up on screen now. That's it for another video. So a massive thank you for watching. I'm sorry this one was a bit delayed. As you can probably hear, I am still a little bit ill. I've been ill for a good few weeks now, so it's been difficult to get this one out. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've liked it in any way or found it useful, please just give me a thumbs up down below. And if you're a regular, massive thank you to you. I really do appreciate you watching. But if you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed and you'd like to do so, you can just click down there on the big red button, or over here on this little picture of me, and that way you'll stay up to date with everything I'm doing each and every week. There are new videos Sunday mornings at 10 AM UK time. So I hope you can join me for the next one. Until then, thanks a lot everyone, and bye for now.